Welcome, everyone. Settle in and get comfortable.
Yeah, grab a drink, whatever you need.
Exactly. Because if you are joining us for this deep dive today, you've probably seen a very specific film from 2008.
Directed by the legendary Hayao Miyazaki.
Right? I am talking about Ponyo.
Such a classic.
It really is. It's widely regarded as one of Studio Ghibli's most, visually stunning, comforting family films.
Oh, absolutely. It's a delightful, incredibly colorful romp by the ocean. It's got gorgeous hand-drawn animation, a super catchy theme song.
And just an overwhelmingly wholesome vibe.
Right, very wholesome.
But today, we are taking a completely different path.
A very different path.
Yeah. We've gathered this massive, fascinating stack of theological essays, fan theories, and incredibly detailed philosophical analyses that completely flip this movie on its head.
It really changes how you see the whole thing.
It does. So our mission today is to explore this deeply compelling argument. The idea that Ponyo isn't just a quirky retelling of The Little Mermaid, but is actually a deeply complex, cosmic, Gnostic allegory about the end of the world.
Which sounds wild, I know, but it's a pleasure to be diving into this with you. We're going to set aside the bright colors and the charming surface-level narrative for a bit to look at the structural bones of this story.
There's a lot hiding under there.
There really is, because once you start looking past the beautiful animation, you begin to reveal a truly intricate framework. We are talking about ancient philosophy, deep theological symbolism, and themes of metaphysical rebellion that date back thousands of years.
It's intense.
Very. We'll be examining the names of the characters, the specific types of prehistoric fish that appear, and even the food they eat, recontextualizing all of it within one of the most esoteric religious traditions in human history.
I mean, it sounds like quite a stretch at first glance, doesn't it?
It does.
The idea that this adorable 5-year-old boy protagonist might actually be a messianic savior figure, or that the quirky underwater wizard in the striped suit is a cosmic jailer.
But the parallels are there?
They are. As I read through these essays, the parallels became almost impossible to ignore. Whether Miyazaki intended this deliberately, or whether he's simply tapping into some profound collective Jungian archetypes that naturally align with these ancient myths.
The evidence is staggering.
It really is staggering.
Yeah.
But to even begin to understand how this works, we need to set the stage.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to do a little Gnosticism 101. Can you walk us through the basics?
Absolutely. It's the perfect place to start because without understanding Gnosticism, the rest of this theory won't carry its full weight. To put it simply for you, Gnosticism isn't just one single religion.
Okay.
It's a broad collection of religious ideas and systems that originated mostly in the 1st and 2nd centuries around the Mediterranean. They grew alongside early Christianity and Hellenistic Judaism.
And a lot of these texts were actually lost for centuries.
Right, exactly. For a very long time, the only way we knew about what Gnostics believed was through the writings of their critics, early church fathers who called them heretics.
Oh, wow. So we only had the negative reviews, basically.
Right, the negative reviews. It wasn't until 1945 when a farmer in Egypt dug up a sealed clay jar containing the Nag Hammadi library that we actually got to read their original texts. Things like the Apocryphon of John or the Gospel of Thomas.
That's fascinating. So what is the core belief that ties all these texts together?
Well, the absolute bedrock of Gnostic thought is the belief that the material, physical world we live in is fundamentally flawed.
Flawed how?
In fact, many Gnostic traditions view the physical world as a literal prison. And here's the crucial twist that separates it from mainstream Western theology. They believe this flawed material prison was not created by the ultimate, true, and unknowable divine being of pure light.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Instead, the physical world was created by a lesser, flawed, and often ignorant creator god. This lesser deity is known as the Demiurge, or sometimes Yaldabaoth.
The Demiurge. Okay, so if the ultimate god is pure light and spirit, this Demiurge is the one who actually got his hands dirty building the physical universe. But he did a bad job of it.
That's a good way to look at it. The Demiurge is often depicted as arrogant. He genuinely believes he is the only god in existence.
Oh, he doesn't even know about the higher god.
Exactly. He creates the physical universe, complete with its rigid laws of physics, time, and decay. And he traps pieces of the true divine light, often called divine sparks, inside physical bodies.
Which brings us right to our first major character reinterpretation in the film. Fujimoto.
Yes, Fujimoto.
On the surface, if you've seen Ponyo, Fujimoto is the frantic, eccentric father of the magic fish girl. He's a former human who lives underwater, he had those dark circles under his eyes, and he complains constantly about how polluted and filthy the surface world is.
And he just wants to keep his daughter safe at home.
Right. But in the context of this Gnostic reading, Fujimoto embodies the absolute textbook definition of the demiurge.
He really does. Look at his behaviors. He literally lives inside a magical submarine bubble. He's completely obsessed with purity, and he is terrified of the filth of the material human world above him.
Right. He's constantly spraying water to cleanse himself whenever he has to interact with the surface. He's a germaphobe on a cosmic scale.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is the psychological profile of the demiurge archetype and how flawlessly Fujimoto embodies it. The demiurge is almost always a tragic figure. He is a blinded creator.
Blinded in what way?
Well, Fujimoto truly, genuinely believes that he is protecting his daughters, who, in this allegory, represent those divine sparks of pure spirit we talked about. He thinks he's keeping them safe from the corrupting influence of the physical realm.
So his intentions aren't necessarily evil, he's just incredibly overbearing.
Precisely. His rigid adherence to tradition, his obsession with maintaining a strict boundary between the land and the sea, actually turns him into a jailer.
A jailer with good intentions, but a jailer nonetheless.
Right. His prison isn't malicious in its intent, but it is deeply fundamentally restrictive. He views his daughter's desire to go to the surface and become human as a chaotic, existential threat to the balance of nature.
And the tools he uses to maintain this control are what the analyses describe as old magic. He's all about rigid formulas, ancient boundaries, and maintaining the absolute status quo of his domain. Think about how we see him in the film.
Down in his submarine.
Yeah. He spends his days down in the dark, painstakingly hoarding what he calls life water in these intricate glass vials.
That imagery is incredibly potent. In Gnostic thought, the demiurge hoards divine essence, the scattered divine sparks, in a desperate attempt to keep his flawed, lower-level world running.
He needs it for power.
Yes. He needs that divine energy to power his machinery. Fujimoto is trying to rewind time. He wants to bring back the ancient age, a time of presumed purity before humans ruined everything.
You really have to picture the sheer exhaustion of Fujimoto. He is a character who has spent literally centuries micromanaging an entire ecosystem.
It looks exhausting.
He's trying to force the universe back into an idealized pre-human state. He overcomplicates everything because the demiurge relies on complex physical laws to maintain control. It's a stark contrast to the beautiful simplicity of the 5-year-old protagonist's actions that we'll discuss later.
It is. The demiurge thinks salvation comes from absolute control and isolation, which is why his efforts are ultimately doomed to fail. You can't put the divine spark in a box forever.
And if Fujimoto is the cosmic jailer, the demiurge, then that means his prisoners are those divine sparks seeking to escape back to the true source of light. Which brings us to the incredibly powerful women in this story.
Yes.
Because if the demiurge is this flawed, controlling architect of the lower world, there has to be a higher power in the Gnostic system, right? Someone he answers to, or someone who represents the true divine.
Yes, there does. And this brings us to one of the most beautiful and complex concepts in Gnostic theology, Sophia, which translates from Greek as wisdom, and the realm of the pleroma, which translates to the fullness of the divine.
I've seen the word pleroma in these essays. How should we visualize that? Because fullness of the divine sounds a bit abstract.
Think of the pleroma like pure, unfiltered, blinding white light. It's the realm of absolute unity where everything is whole and perfect.
Okay.
The demiurge's physical world, on the other hand, is like a prism that has intercepted that light and shattered it into separate, rigid, individual colors. The goal of Gnosticism is to reverse that process, to gather all those scattered fragments of colored light and put them back together into the unified white light of the pleroma.
That is a great analogy. So where does Sophia fit into this? Is she the white light?
She's a part of it. In Gnostic thought, Sophia is a much higher divine figure known as an eon. She exists completely outside of the demiurge's rigid, rule-bound structure. In fact, in the most famous Gnostic myth, the Valentinian myth, Sophia is actually the mother of the demiurge.
Wait, really? The ultimate divine wisdom created the flawed jailer.
It was an accident. The myth goes that Sophia, out of a profound passion and curiosity, tried to emanate or create something entirely on her own without her divine consort.
So she acted independently.
Right. And because she acted outside the perfect harmony of the pleroma, her creation was flawed, aborted, and ignorant. That creation was the demiurge. Horrified by what she had made, she cast him out of the pleroma into a lower realm, wrapping him in a cloud so none of the other divine beings would see him.
Wow. So he is literally born in isolation and ignorance. That explains why the demiurge thinks he's the only god. He's never even seen the higher realm.
Exactly. But Sophia feels immense guilt for this, so she acts as the vital bridge between the absolute unknowable divine and our flawed material world. She secretly plants divine sparks pieces of her own spiritual light into the demiurge's human creations, so that they might one day wake up and return to the pleroma.
And the characters in the film mapping to these concepts are breathtakingly clear. First, we have our titular character, Ponyo. In this reading, she is the trapped soul. She is the divine spark that has been held captive by the demiurge, but she inherently yearns to escape, to transcend her current form, and to return to the true source.
Yes, her innate drive isn't just curiosity about the surface, it's a metaphysical homing beacon.
And then we have Granamere. She is Ponyo's mother, the goddess of mercy, the mother of the sea. Visually, she is stunning.
Oh, incredibly stunning.
She's massive, ethereal, literally glowing with a golden light. She commands so much more power and presence than Fujimoto could ever dream of. When ships pass over her in the water, the sailors look down in absolute awe. She is Sophia.
What's fascinating here is the sharp, undeniable contrast between Fujimoto and Granamere. It's brilliant. We just discussed Fujimoto's absolute panic. He's frantic, sweating, constantly worrying about the rules being broken.
Yeah, he's always stressed out.
But Granamere, she is the embodiment of calm. When Ponyo escapes and begins her transformation into a human, Fujimoto sees it as a catastrophe. He thinks the world is ending.
But Granamere doesn't view Ponyo's desire for humanity as a fall from grace, does she?
Not at all. She doesn't view it as a corruption of her purity. She views it as a natural, necessary evolution of the soul. As Sophia, she understands the grander cosmic picture that the demiurge is completely blind to. She knows that the divine spark must experience the material world in order to ultimately redeem it.
The essays we're looking at emphasize her role as the mediator. When Granamere arrives on the scene, she doesn't smite Fujimoto. She doesn't destroy him or punish him for being a restrictive jailer. She simply makes his entire set of rules utterly irrelevant.
She overrides him completely.
Right. She bypasses his authority completely by validating an upcoming test of love. She says essentially, if this boy's love is true, Ponyo can stay human. If not, she turns into sea foam. She sets a new paradigm that completely overrides Fujimoto's old magic.
It's worth pausing here to ask you, the listener, to consider how profoundly this flips traditional Western theological narratives. In so many mainstream traditions, the ultimate power in the universe is depicted as a punishing, rule-making, patriarchal king who demands strict obedience to the law. If you break the law, you are cast out.
Right. Fire and brimstone.
But in this Gnostic allegory, the ultimate power, the connection to the pleroma, is represented by a vast, merciful, calm mother figure. She doesn't demand ritual obedience, she allows for transformation. She permits the divine spark to take a massive risk, descending fully into the material world, because she trusts in the power of love to act as the ultimate redeeming force. It's a stunning subversion of the standard angry god trope.
It changes the whole feeling of the cosmos in the film, from one of fear to one of deep, profound grace. It also overlaps heavily with Japanese Shinto traditions, right? The idea of Kannon, the goddess of mercy. It's fascinating how Miyazaki blends this Eastern animism, where spirits reside in the ocean and the trees, with what looks so much like a first-century Hellenistic philosophy.
The overlap is where you really start to wonder about Jung's collective unconscious. Whether Miyazaki read the Apocryphon of John, or whether he just intuitively understands the universal human desire to break free from restrictive dogma and return to a nurturing maternal source, the narrative architecture is identical.
But here's the thing. If Granamere is the distant, vast, higher divine, she's too large to interact with the minute details of the human world directly. She needs an agent. There needs to be a messenger on the ground.
A bridge.
Someone to actually facilitate this incredible transformation of the soul. Which brings us to arguably the most surprising and wonderful element of this entire theory. We're talking about Susuke.
It's a brilliant narrative choice to make the savior a child. In Gnostic traditions, as we've established, the divine spark is trapped in the material world. But it's worse than just being trapped. It is in a state of forgetfulness. The soul is asleep to its true divine nature.
It has amnesia.
Exactly. Because of this profound amnesia, the soul cannot save itself. It requires a messenger of light, a redeemer, who comes from outside the demiurge's corrupted system to wake the spark up and remind it of its true home. In the cinematic allegory, Suke is that redeemer.
Now, you might be thinking, come on, he's just a cute kid in the yellow shirt. But here's where it gets really interesting. The analyses detail three highly specific, visceral ways that Suse perfectly mirrors the Christ figure with the Gnostic Redeemer. Let's walk through them, because this blew my mind when I first read it. The first is the act of renaming.
Names carry immense power in esoteric traditions.
They really do. When Susuke first finds the little goldfish, she already has a name given to her by Fujimoto, Brunhilde. Now, if you know your classical music or mythology, Brunhilde is a name steeped in Richard Wagner's opera, The Ring Cycle. She is a Valkyrie. It's a name that signifies war, martial duty, and strict, unwavering obedience to a demanding father figure, Wotan. It is, quite literally, her prison name. Miyazaki even uses the Ride of the Valkyries musical motif during her escape.
The name Brunhilde ties her directly to the demiurge's system of laws and martial duty. But what does Sukeri do? He discards that name entirely. He looks at her and simply says, "Your name is Ponyo."
He just renames her on the spot.
In biblical and mystical traditions, naming something is an act of incredible spiritual power. It gives a being a soul or a specific place in the divine order. In Genesis, Adam names the animals to establish a relationship with them. By giving her a grace name, a name born out of affection rather than duty, Suke is performing a linguistic exorcism. He is granting her a new identity, one that is recognized by the heart and by love, not by the rigid laws of her cosmic jailer.
A linguistic exorcism. That's a perfect way to phrase it. Okay, the second way Suke acts as the Redeemer is intense. It's the blood sacrifice. Now, if you're just casually watching the movie, there's a scene where Suke cuts his thumb on a glass jar while rescuing Ponyo. Ponyo licks the blood off his thumb, and the cut is instantly healed. It plays as a cute, slightly weird magical moment. But through our Gnostic lens, this is a visceral, literal act of communion.
Let's break down why that's so significant. There's an old theological term, transubstantiation. In mainstream Christianity, particularly Catholicism, this is the belief that during the Eucharist, the bread and wine literally transform into the body and blood of Christ. The human consumes the divine to achieve salvation.
But the essays argue that what's happening with Ponyo and Susuke is actually transubstantiation in reverse. Let's pause and break that down for a second. What does reverse transubstantiation look like?
By consuming a drop of Suke's blood, Ponyo the divine spark is consuming a part of his humanity. She is taking his mortal human essence into herself to become like him. In traditional theology, this mirrors the concept of logos, or the divine word, becoming flesh. The divine must take on humanity so that humanity might ultimately touch the divine.
Because if Susuke were just an ethereal spirit himself, he wouldn't be able to anchor her to the physical world.
Exactly, but you can't just have any human be the anchor, right? If Sutike were a 40-year-old cynical accountant, this blood pact wouldn't work. The Redeemer must belong to the material world, yet remain entirely uncorrupted by it. Sutike acts as the pure human anchor that saves the lost soul, grounding her in the physical world through a literal exchange of life force.
And that brings us perfectly to the third point, the childlike spirit. Why is the Savior a 5-year-old? The texts we're analyzing point straight to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18, verse 3. Unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Susuke possesses a pure, unconditional, uncomplicated love. He doesn't have the cynicism, the fear, or the pollution that Fujimoto so deeply despises in adult humans.
The choice to make the Redeemer a child isn't just for the sake of a family-friendly narrative. It's a profound theological statement. The demiurge overcomplicates reality. He uses vials, spells, grand anxieties, and environmental doom to try and fix the world. The true messenger of light simply acts out of instinctual kindness. Susuke doesn't need to understand the cosmic mechanics of the universe to save it. His innate purity is the very mechanism of salvation.
I just want to paint a picture of how brilliantly absurd this is. Contrast the image of Susie doing this incredibly heavy metaphysical universe-altering lifting with the fact that he is literally just a 5-year-old kid running around in shorts with a little green plastic bucket. He's toting the divine spark around in a toy pail. It's the ultimate statement that the most profound, earth-shattering truths aren't found in ancient spellbooks or high towers. They're found in the simplest, most grounded acts of human connection.
It's a beautiful juxtaposition. But the narrative requires more than just passive kindness to break the hold of the demiurge. For the soul to be truly liberated, the Savior must actively overthrow the old law. The restrictive rules of the old world must be broken. And this is where the theory takes a turn that is both deeply profound and, frankly, highly entertaining.
Oh, this is my absolute favorite part of the entire stack of notes. Yeah. To break the old laws of the universe, our little Savior uses the most unlikely weapon imaginable, a slice of lunch meat. Welcome, everyone, to the Ham Covenant. Let's set the scene. Susuke, his mother Lisa, and Ponyo, who is now transformed into a little human girl, are sitting out a massive, terrifying hurricane. The power is out. Lisa fires up a generator and makes them big, steaming bowls of hot ramen. Suke takes a piece of processed deli ham and gives it to Ponyo. She's never had human food before, and she goes absolutely wild for it. It's an iconic, adorable scene. But the subtext.
The subtext is a massive theological transgression. To understand why, we have to look at the Judeo-Christian tradition, which heavily influences the concept of the old law versus the new law in Western thought. In the rigid dietary laws of the Old Testament, in Leviticus, pork, and by extension, ham is strictly forbidden. It is treif, it is unclean.
So in this symbolic framework, when Susuke offers Ponyo a slice of ham, he isn't just giving her a snack, he is offering her the ultimate forbidden fruit of the human material world.
Exactly. To Fujimoto, the demiurge who represents tradition and purity, the very idea of a magical sea creature consuming processed human pork is the ultimate corruption. It is the desecration of the natural order. It's the pollution of the divine spark.
It reminds me of being a kid and sneaking table scraps to the dog. You know you're breaking the rules of the house, but the joy of sharing that forbidden treat with your best friend outweighs the fear of getting caught. But to Susuke, who represents the revolution of love, it isn't a corruption. It's simply a gift. He's just sharing his favorite food.
That innocent transgression shifts the cosmic balance. I want to connect this to a very specific moment in the New Testament. In the book of Acts, chapter 10, the Apostle Peter has a vision. In this vision, a great sheet is lowered from heaven containing all sorts of animals, including those forbidden by the old dietary laws. A voice tells Peter to kill and eat. When Peter protests that the food is unclean, the voice responds, "What God has cleansed you must not call common or unclean."
So the old rules are just wiped away.
Yes, that vision marked a monumental shift in early Christianity. It symbolized that the old barriers and rigid laws of separation were being torn down to make way for a new, inclusive covenant that welcomed everyone, not just those who followed the strict rules of purity.
So the ham is literally the catalyst for the new covenant, and the essays go even deeper into the ramen itself. They analyze the bowl of ramen as a meal composed of three elements. You have the hot water, which represents the spirit or the sea. You have the noodles, born of wheat, which represent the earth or the material. And finally, you have the ham, which crowns the dish as the symbol of the new covenant.
It elevates the simple dinner into a communal feast, a literal Eucharist, where the spiritual world and the human world become fully integrated into one shared substance.
Suzuki emerges here as the ultimate lawbreaker. The demiurge relies on the absolute separation of sea and land, spirit and matter. Suzuki entirely disregards these rigid formulas, not out of malice or rebellion, but because he operates on an entirely different frequency, the new law of mercy. By bringing Ponyo into his home and feeding her this forbidden meat, he is proving on a cosmic scale that personal connection and love are vastly more important than adherence to ancient ritual. He invalidates the demiurge's entire worldview with a piece of lunch meat.
It's humorous, but deeply profound. The cosmic code is rewritten not through a magical battle, but through hospitality.
But you can't rewrite the code of the universe without triggering a massive cosmic response. This act of rebellion, this ham covenant, is the final straw. The demiurge's system cannot handle the paradox of a divine spark consuming the material world in love, and the system begins to collapse. Which leads us to one of the most visually spectacular yet frequently misunderstood sequences in the entire film, the celestial crisis.
The environmental anomalies in the film are impossible to ignore, specifically the behavior of the moon. As the story progresses, the moon begins moving out of its orbit, it's falling closer and closer to the Earth, and its gravitational pull is causing the tides to go absolutely haywire, swelling the oceans to terrifying heights. Now, in a standard disaster movie, this is just a ticking clock to build suspense. But in our Gnostic framework, the falling moon is a symbol of unparalleled significance.
Let's look at the moon through a mystical lens. The analyses explain that in various esoteric traditions, including Ptolemaic cosmology, the universe is made up of spheres. And the moon represents the boundary of what is called the sublunary realm.
Let's define the sublunary realm for a moment. In ancient Greek and Gnostic thought, everything below the moon, the Earth and its atmosphere, was subject to change, decay, generation, and corruption. Everything above the moon was considered eternal and unchanging. The sphere of the moon acts as the border patrol between the divine and the material.
And who patrols that border?
The archons. These are essentially the demiurge's henchmen. They are the cosmic forces that control the physical mechanics of the universe. They control time, the changing of the tides, and the wheel of fate that keeps souls trapped in the cycle of the material world. The moon is their domain.
So the moon isn't just a rock in the sky. It is the literal pendulum of the demiurge's clock. It regulates his restrictive reality.
Exactly. So when the moon begins to fall out of the sky in the film, it signifies nothing less than the end of time. The cosmic machineries are breaking down. The demiurge's clock has fundamentally shattered. The rigid timeline he has enforced for millennia is collapsing because the new covenant has been initiated on Earth. The boundaries are dissolving.
And the direct result of that broken clock is the flood. The oceans rise up and completely swallow Suzuki's coastal town. Now, if you look at a flood in traditional Western stories like Noah's Ark, the flood is almost always an act of destructive punishment. God is angry at human corruption, so God wipes the slate clean by drowning the sinners. But that is not what is happening here at all, is it?
No, it's the exact opposite, and this is where the visual storytelling is so vital. We must completely shift our perspective on the flood. If we connect this to the bigger picture, instead of viewing the submerged town as a wrathful punishment, it must be viewed as a global baptism. It is the waters of the Spirit washing over the rigid structures of the material world. It turns the entire town into a womb. This creates a beautiful liminal space, a threshold where the lowly, mundane material world and the high, divine world of the sea merge into one unified reality. No one is hurt in this flood. The waters are calm and clear.
And the visuals here are where the Gnostic theory just sings. When Susuke and Ponyo go out onto the submerged water the next morning, what do they see swimming beneath them? Not regular fish. The essays specifically highlight the appearance of Devonian fish.
The Devonian period, often called the Age of Fishes, occurred roughly 360 to 419 million years ago.
We're talking about prehistoric creatures like the Bothrialepis and the Diplocaulus. These are heavily armored, bizarre-looking ancient fish. Why are prehistoric fish suddenly swimming over the flooded telephone poles and asphalt roads of a modern Japanese town?
Because time itself has collapsed. The return of these ancient primordial creatures visually represents the material world being folded back into its original pre-prison state. In Gnosticism, this state of original unity and fullness is the pleroma we mentioned earlier. The demiurge's flawed timeline is being erased, and the world is returning to the primordial chaos of pure spirit. It washes away the polluted human layer that Fujimoto so despised, but it does it through a baptism of grace rather than a purging of wrath.
It is so breathtaking to watch. And amidst all this primordial vastness, we have Suke. He is navigating this flooded ancient world in a tiny toy boat that has been magically enlarged by Ponyo. What is powering the boat? A single flickering candle. The texts point out that this is a classic foundational Gnostic image. The pure soul navigating the dark, turbulent waters of the material world, guided and propelled solely by a small, divine flame of light.
The symbolism is immaculate. And notice Susuke's reaction to the massive, terrifying, prehistoric monsters swimming beneath his fragile boat. Remember, these are creatures with heavily armored heads and bizarre shapes. They look alien. But Suso does not cower. He isn't paralyzed by the unknown. Instead, he looks down into the water. He recognizes them from his dinosaur books, and he calls them out by their true names. He points and says, look, a Bothrialepis. This is the ultimate manifestation of Gnosis.
Gnosis meaning knowledge, right? Saving knowledge.
Exactly. By knowing exactly what these ancient creatures are, by naming them, Susuke robs them of their power to cause fear. The demiurge rules through fear of the unknown deep. He relies on humanity's terror of what lies beneath the surface. The Redeemer, however, conquers the deep through true knowledge and unwavering calm. Susuke looks into the abyss, calls it by its name, and keeps sailing his little candlelit boat.
It's an incredibly empowering image.
Yeah.
But while Susuke is floating above the submerged world, passing the test of the deep, we have to ask, what is happening at the very bottom of the sea? Because Susuke's town isn't empty. There are people trapped down there under the weight of the water, specifically the elderly residents of the nursing home where Susuke's mother works.
This brings us to one of the most poignant and moving aspects of the entire allegory. We need to examine these elderly women through our Gnostic framework. In this reading, these women represent Susuke's disciples. But they are a very specific kind of disciple. They represent souls who are trapped in the ultimate, inescapable, earthly prison. I'm speaking, of course, of the decaying physical body and the stiffness of the material world.
There's an old Orphic pun that the essays bring up here that applies perfectly, soma sema.
Yes, Somasema is a foundational concept in Orphism and later adopted by Gnosticism.
What exactly does that translate to?
It literally translates from ancient Greek as the body is a tomb. Soma means body, Sama means tomb or sign. It's the belief that the soul is divine and eternal, but it is currently buried inside the heavy, restrictive shell of physical flesh.
And the animation conveys that heaviness so well. For these elderly women, their wheelchairs are not just mobility aids. Metaphorically, they are the literal shackles of the flesh. They represent the heavy, unyielding laws of gravity, aging, and chronic pain inflicted by the demiurge's material realm. You see them struggling to even reach for a piece of origami in the early scenes.
So when the massive storm hits and the nursing home is completely swallowed by the rising sea, the audience's initial reaction might be horror. It looks like a disaster. But again, in this paradigm, it isn't a tragedy at all. It is a transfiguration. The women are not drowned. They are enveloped in a massive magical air bubble resting on the ocean floor, created by Grandma Mar and Ponyo's magic.
This bubble acts as the Gnostic upper room, or a micropleroma. It's a sacred space carved out of the abyss where the heavy, punishing laws of physics no longer apply.
And the scene that follows is pure joy. Inside this bubble, we see these women who, moments before, could barely move, who were confined to their chairs and suffering from the aches of age, suddenly standing up. They are running, they are sprinting and leaping through the shallow water inside the bubble. They haven't just been medically healed, they have been completely liberated from their material shells. They have been made childlike again, experiencing the pure, unadulterated gnosis of absolute joy. The psychological weight of aging in the demiurgic system is completely lifted.
What's fascinating here is how the film handles the concept of skepticism, specifically through the character of Toki. Toki is the grumpy, cynical elderly woman who initially rejected Ponyo. When Susik first showed her the goldfish, she freaked out and called it a bad omen that would cause a tsunami. She is the quintessential doubting Thomas of this disciple group.
She is. She rejects the magical, she clings to the cynicism of the old world, and she even initially refuses to step out into the miraculous bubble, choosing to stay back on the dry, elevated grass and complain about the new way.
But even Toki gets saved. When she finally lays eyes on Grandma Mare, when she is confronted face-to-face with the higher divine Sophia, all of her skepticism instantly vanishes. She sheds her grumpy exterior and embraces the miracle. It proves that the salvation Susuke and Ponyo bring isn't exclusive to the innocent, it's universal. Even the hardest, most cynical hearts bound by the material world are offered grace. And I have to say, injecting a bit of humor from the notes here, one of the essays points out that this is, without a doubt, the best retirement plan ever conceived in human history.
It certainly beats the alternatives of modern healthcare.
Right. Forget your 401k, forget the savings accounts. Just hang out in a coastal town, wait for a magical fish girl to fall in love with a 5-year-old, trigger a Devonian-era cosmic flood, and boom, you can breathe underwater and sprint around like an Olympic track star. It's the ultimate fountain of youth.
It's a humorous way to look at it, but it beautifully highlights the sheer, overwhelming grace of the narrative. The Demiurge's rules say you age, you suffer, and you die. The New Covenant says you are renewed in the waters of the Spirit. However, Susuke didn't bring this new covenant to fruition entirely on his own. He needed a foundation. There is a crucial figure we haven't discussed deeply yet, a figure who stands firmly planted between the vulnerable human world and the raging divine storm.
Oh, yes. We have to talk about Lisa, Susuke's mother, because if you watch the movie and think she's just a cool mom who drives a little too fast on winding coastal roads, you are missing a massive piece of the puzzle. In this framework, Lisa represents the awakened human. Or, to use the theological term provided by our readings, she is the lower Sophia.
Which means she is wisdom made manifest in the flesh. This raises an important question. What is the role of a parent, a mortal guardian, in a messianic journey? If Grandma Mare is the higher Sophia, vast, glowing, and untouchable, Lisa is the grounded, practical application of that divine wisdom. Look at her geographic placement in the story. Her home is perched incredibly high on a cliff overlooking the ocean. In Gnostic symbolism, this acts as the watchtower. It is the beacon on the edge of the abyss.
And her actions during the crisis are incredible. While the rest of the world is panicking, while the town is evacuating inland away from the storm, Lisa puts Suki in the car and intentionally drives into the eye of the chaos. She speeds along the coastal roads as the waves are literally crashing over them to reach the watchtower. She doesn't cower.
And when they finally get home, she does something extraordinary. She invites the divine anomaly Ponyo into her home. She gives her a dry towel, fires up the generator, makes her tea, and serves her the ham. By doing this, she is consecrating her domestic material space as a temple for the new covenant.
She is the lower Sophia, teaching the raw, newly incarnated divine spark how to actually exist in the material world. She teaches Ponyo the rituals of humanity, the warmth of a towel, the sharing of a meal. But her role as the guardian of the watchtower goes even further. Consider the magnificent scene with the signal lights.
Let's break down the symbolism of that moment because visually it is one of the most striking scenes in the film. The storm is raging, the power is out across the entire coast, and Lisa and Susuke go out to the edge of the cliff with a massive optical signaling light. They are flashing Morse code across the dark, raging ocean to Kichichi, Susuke's father, who is the captain of a ship out at sea.
So you have Lisa and Suki using pure light, which is the ultimate symbol of gnosis or divine knowledge, to communicate across the dark ocean, which represents the void.
Precisely. And who are they communicating with? Kuchi is stuck on a ship. A ship is a literal, fragile vessel of the material world, currently being violently tossed about by the Demiurge's apocalyptic storm. Lisa is standing on the firm ground of the watchtower, teaching the young Redeemer how to wield the light to comfort those lost in the darkness of the material struggle. The Morse code is a literal transmission of gnosis through the void.
She is showing him how to be a beacon. But then she does the hardest thing a mother could do, and it sets up the climax of the entire film. She leaves. She knows the elderly women at the nursing home are in danger, so she hugs Susuke, tells him she has to go check on them, and leaves him alone in the house with Ponyo. The text explicitly likened this to the descent of Sophia into the abyss.
It is the ultimate Gnostic test. She leaves the watchtower and descends into the submerged, flooded world below to ensure the disciples, the elderly women, are safe. By leaving Susuke alone, she is initiating the final trial of the Savior. She is leaving him with the light, the candle, and the vessel, the toy boat. She is trusting him to prove his worth. She is acknowledging that he alone must navigate the waters to balance the cosmos that the Demiurge has broken.
It's such a powerful act of faith. She basically says, you have the tools, you have the pure heart, now you must walk the path. And that path leads directly to the cosmic climax of the film, where all of these esoteric threads finally tie together. The firmament must be broken.
And broken it is. Throughout the film, we have seen Fujimoto, the Demiurge, desperately hoarding his life water in those magical glass vials in his submarine. These vials aren't just containers. In our Gnostic map of the film, they represent the essence of the spheres. In ancient cosmology, the Earth was believed to be surrounded by concentric, crystalline spheres, often referred to as the seven heavens. These spheres are the barriers created by the Demiurge to keep the divine light trapped in the lower realms.
So when Ponyo sneaks into Fujimoto's sanctuary earlier in the film and literally shatters those vials, she isn't just making a mess, she is breaking the firmament. She is shattering the crystalline spheres of the seven heavens. She releases all of that hoarded, trapped light, causing the world to absolutely overflow with pure spirit. It's an explosion of divine energy, and the visual result of this is stunning. Ponyo escapes on the back of massive magical waves made of waterfish. She is literally running on top of the raging ocean.
That image of Ponyo running on the spirit fish is breathtaking and deeply symbolic. She is, quite literally, walking on water. In biblical contexts, walking on water is the ultimate universally recognized sign of a divinity completely conquering and subjugating the laws of the material world. The gravity, the danger, and the chaos of the ocean do not apply to her because the firmament has been broken, spirit has flooded the material plane.
So what does this all mean? We have a broken firmament, a flooded world, a terrified demiurge, and a little boy in a toy boat. It all comes down to the final encounter, the ultimate spiritual trial overseen by Grandmamere, the higher divine. Susuke finally reaches the underwater bubble where everyone is gathered. Grandmamere looks at this 5-year-old boy and asks him the questions that will decide the fate of the universe.
It is a trial of absolute acceptance. Grandmamere asks Susuke, "Can you love her as a fish?" The theological translation of this is, can you love the divine spark even when it appears alien, lowly, or strange to your material understanding? And then she asks, can you love her as a human? Meaning, can you love the spirit even when it is bound by the fragile, mortal flesh of the material world? She is asking if his love is conditional based on the form the soul takes.
And Susuke, without a moment of hesitation, passes the test. He says he loves all the Ponyos. He accepts the divine in every single form it takes. He proves that the pure childlike heart does not discriminate based on the rigid categories that the demiurge obsesses over. His love is the unifying force that heals the glitch in the universe.
And that acceptance leads to the ultimate resolution of the Gnostic conflict, the final handshake between Susuke and Fujimoto.
Oh, this is the perfect capstone. Fujimoto, looking exhausted and defeated, finally extends his hand to Suke. They shake hands. This isn't just an overprotective father grudgingly accepting his daughter's new friend. It is the demiurge finally, completely surrendering to the new messenger. He realizes his old laws are dead, his underwater fortress, his bubble, is abandoned. The artificial barriers between the sea and the land, between the spirit and the material, have dissolved. A new, unified world begins under the new covenant of love.
The Demiurge's era of fear and isolation is over. He relinquishes his need to control the divine spark, allowing Sophia's wisdom to prevail. The cosmic scales are balanced not by force, but by a child's unwavering compassion.
I just want to summarize the ultimate mind-bending irony of this entire film. When you zoom out and look at what we've just discussed, this is the plot. To save a goldfish he found in a jar, a 5-year-old boy watches his entire civilization get swallowed by a Devonian-era cosmic flood. He uses a plastic bucket and a slice of processed deli meat to defeat a centuries-old cosmic jailer. He shatters the firmament of the heavens, looks an ancient goddess of the sea in the eye, and basically says, yeah, I'm cool with all of this. He is, without a doubt, the most chill, unbothered savior figure in the history of cinema.
It's a profound irony, and that is precisely what makes the film a masterpiece. It masks the most esoteric, heavy philosophical concepts behind the innocent, wide-eyed gaze of a child. It suggests that perhaps the complexity we adults project onto the universe is our own demiurgic flaw, and that truth is actually quite simple.
Let's take a breath and recap the incredible journey we've been on today. We've completely deconstructed what is widely considered a soft, comforting family movie, and we've revealed it to be an epic, sweeping tale of spiritual liberation. We've explored the breaking of restrictive cosmic laws, the shattering of the firmament, the initiation of a new covenant via a slice of ham, and the absolute triumph of pure, unconditional love over fear-based demiurgic control. And I want to remind you, the listener, why we do this, why we dive into these wild theories. This deep dive shows us how viewing familiar, everyday things, like a beloved animated movie, through a radically different, unexpected lens, like ancient Gnostic texts, can uncover astonishing hidden depths. It forces us to ask new questions about the media we consume and the stories we tell ourselves.
Indeed. It transforms passive consumption into active philosophical engagement. And before we conclude, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on the text we've discussed today, but brings it out of the realm of animation and into our own lives. If Susuke represents the ultimate pure, rule-breaking love that is required to reset a flawed, rigid universe, what does that mean for us as adults? Think about it. We live in a world that constantly, relentlessly encourages us to act exactly like Fujimoto. We are taught to build bubbles of security. We are encouraged to hoard our resources, our own little vials of life water. We are taught to fear the unpredictability of the outside world, and we obsess over strict routines and rigid rules just to feel a fleeting sense of safety. So the provocative question is this. If the key to true gnosis and ultimate spiritual liberation is, as the text says, to become like a little child, how do we do that? How do we, as hardened, cynical adults living in our own self-made demiurgic prisons, find the courage to tear down our protective bubbles? How do we learn to embrace the unknown storms of life? And perhaps most importantly, how do we find the grace to offer our own metaphorical slice of ham to a world that desperately needs connection?
What an incredible question to leave off on. How do we break our own bubbles? I want you to carry that thought with you today. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible cosmic discussion. Keep questioning, keep looking for the hidden depths in the stories around you, and we will catch you on the next deep dive. Take care, everyone.